I've heard it so often now from various singers in terms of wanting to really be emotional in the true sense because it's brought about by the music and it's required by the performance, but then having what Lucy Schafer called a backseat driver that sits in the back of your mind and that sort of reminds you can't do this. So I was wondering whether you can give us some ideas of what you do when you sing, how that works, because it seems to me it's a very difficult, contradictory strategy to sort of have to conjure up emotion at the same time controlling them.
Rehearsal. That's it. That's the secret sauce, and that's the only thing that works. And in the end, my strategy is in rehearsal to allow those emotions to come forward and find them in my character and know what are the moments in which that character wants to cry. And then do that enough times so that by the time I get to the performance, it's no longer me that's crying, but the audience. I had this experience was very vivid for me when I played Beth in Mark Adamo's Little Women, based on the Louise Alcott novel. And she dies, in the middle of the opera. And she dies at the end of her aria, and the aria sits very high, and it's very soft, and it's very hard to sing if you have, your throat is clutching. So, it wasn't until the dress rehearsal, and I was panicking, that I could get through it without crying. But, we rehearsed enough so that by the time I got on stage, I could just mimic what I had done in some ways during rehearsal, but not allow the emotion to take over.
Yeah, it's a very similar thing, practice. I also try to focus on the text. And I find that if my primary goal is communicating the text like a normal human would do in the course of our day, then the emotions, if you're doing it diligently and authentically, the emotions will come. I think the kiss of death is when we try to focus on a specific emotion. This is the emotional response I will affect in my listeners, and that doesn't work. It's like the whole thing of a woman's portraying Carmen. Okay, so just act sexy. What does that mean? And when you try to act sexy, that's the last thing you are. And so, the notion of just kind of sometimes bring it back to basic and realize I am here to communicate text, and through the use of the text and the music, if you're lucky enough to be singing music composed by a master, they pretty much hand it to you on a silver platter. I mean, like when I sing Verdi, if I get out of Verdi's way, people will think I've delivered this emotional tour de force where I may feel like, gosh, I'm not really doing anything. That maybe doesn't work as much with 20th century music, which is much more it's much more aligned with theatrical drama. But it's just kind of figuring out what your character's about and trying to be true to that, but also understanding that you're within the context of a huge artifice. Whether it's because you're singing or because you're locked in time by beats in a measure.
Can I just say one more thing
Absolutely.
about that?
Yep.
So we also take a lesson from acting, which is acting. It's doing, it's moving, it's not feeling. Mm-hmm. And so when you act, you have to figure out what is the verb that you are doing in order to have the audience understand what your character is motivated by. So, for example, as Adam was saying, like if you want to act drunk, if you're drunk, you really try to show the people that you're sober. So the drunker you are on stage, the more sober you try to act. Mm-hmm. And that's how it gets portrayed. So in the rehearsal process, you realize what are those actions that the audience will interpret as an authentic indication of that particular behavior.